London, 1856. The scent of rain clung to the morning air as Miss Olivia Hartwood hurried down the cobblestone street, her boots clicking against the wet stones. She clutched her worn leather satchel to her chest, protecting the precious letter inside, her last hope for employment. The spires of London's grand buildings disappeared behind her as she ventured into the wealthier district where the townhouses stood like sentinels, their windows gleaming with prosperity she had never known. Pembroke House, she murmured, checking the address once more. Her heart fluttered nervously as she approached the imposing residence, its iron gates a reminder of the boundary between her world and that of the aristocracy. The butler who answered her knock regarded her with the cool assessment of one who had spent decades determining a person's worth at a glance. "I am here to see Lady Germain," Olivia said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Regarding the position of cooking instructor." "Indeed." He beckoned her inside with a stiff gesture. "This way, Miss Hartwood." Olivia Hartwood. The hallway stretched before her, adorned with portraits of stern-faced ancestors and marble busts watching her passage with lifeless eyes. She was led to a small sitting room where an elderly woman sat rigidly upright, her silver hair arranged in an elaborate style that spoke of a personal lady's maid and hours of attention. "Miss Hartwood, your ladyship," the butler announced before retreating. Lady Germain assessed Olivia with sharp blue eyes. "You're younger than I expected." "I am 24, my lady. I have been teaching cookery at Mrs. Winterton's Academy for young ladies for 5 years. Until its unfortunate closure, I understand." The older woman's tone suggested she knew precisely why the school had closed, unpaid debts and a scandal involving the headmistress's son. "My nephew requires specialized instruction. He has particular needs." Olivia maintained her composure. "I am adaptable to any student's requirements, your ladyship." "Are you?" Lady Germain's thin lips curved in what might have been amusement. "Lord Lawrence Germain is not a schoolboy, Miss Hartwood. He is the Duke of Pembroke, and he requires instruction in the domestic arts for reasons I shall leave him to explain. The position pays £15 per month and includes room and board at Pembroke Estate in Derbyshire." £15. The sum was generous beyond Olivia's expectations. It would allow her to send money to her ailing mother in Bath and perhaps even save a little. "When would I begin?" "Immediately. The Duke departs for Pembroke tomorrow morning. You will accompany him." Lady Germain rang a small silver bell. "Jenkins will show you to a guest room for tonight." "Your belongings?" "I have only what I carry, my lady. The rest is in storage." Something like sympathy flashed across Lady Germain's face. "I shall have appropriate attire sent up. The Duke expects punctuality and propriety, Miss Hartwood. I trust you understand the delicacy of your position, a young, unmarried woman in the household of a bachelor duke. I assure you, my conduct will be beyond reproach." "See that it is. The Duke has suffered enough scandal." With those cryptic words, Olivia was dismissed to follow the butler upstairs. That evening, as she sat alone in the guest chamber dressed in a borrowed nightgown of fine cotton, Olivia penned a quick letter to her mother, explaining her sudden employment. She carefully omitted the fact that her new pupil was a duke. Her mother would worry about the impropriety. Instead, she focused on the generous salary and country air that might improve her persistent cough. What sort of man needed cooking lessons from a woman of her station? And what scandal had touched him? She had heard whispers, of course. The Duke of Pembroke was notorious for his reclusive nature following some incident 2 years prior. The London gossips had buzzed with speculation, but Olivia had been too occupied with her teaching position to pay much attention. Morning came with a flurry of activity. A lady's maid helped Olivia dress in a new travelling outfit, a modest dark blue dress with a matching pelisse that fit as though it had been made for her. Perhaps it had been. Lady Germain's efficiency was formidable. The Duke was already in the entrance hall when Olivia descended, his broad shoulders encased in a perfectly tailored coat, his attention focused on papers in his hand. He did not look up as she approached, nor when his aunt joined them. "Lawrence," Lady Germain said sharply. "Your instructor has arrived." He turned then, and Olivia found herself facing a man whose countenance could only be described as thunderous. His dark hair was swept back from a high forehead, and his eyes, a stormy grey, narrowed as they assessed her. A scar traced a thin line from his right temple to his cheekbone, a stark white mark against his tanned skin. "This is Miss Hartwood." His voice was deep, cultured, and distinctly displeased. "Yes, Your Grace," Olivia replied before Lady Germain could answer. "I look forward to our lessons." "Do you?" His tone suggested he did not share the sentiment. "Aunt Augusta, when I requested a cooking instructor, I had expected someone with more experience." "Miss Hartwood comes highly recommended," Lady Germain replied firmly. "And she was available immediately." "I assure you, Your Grace, I am well qualified," Olivia said, refusing to be cowed by his obvious displeasure. "I have taught cooking to students of varying abilities for years." "School girls," he scoffed. "Women who will one day manage households," she countered. "The principles remain the same regardless of the student." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, that she had dared to contradict him. "The carriage is waiting, Lawrence," Lady Germain interrupted. "You'll miss your train if you continue this pointless debate." With a curt nod, the Duke turned and strode toward the door, leaving Olivia to follow in his wake after a hasty curtsy to Lady Germain. The journey to Derbyshire was long and largely silent. The Duke buried himself in papers and books, occasionally making notes in a small leather-bound journal. Olivia occupied herself with the passing landscape, watching as London's sooty buildings gave way to rolling countryside. When they finally arrived at Pembroke Estate as dusk was falling, Olivia was struck by the imposing grandeur of the house, a sprawling stone mansion with Gothic touches that gave it an almost forbidding appearance. Yet there was beauty in its symmetry, in the carefully tended gardens now fading into the gathering darkness. The household staff lined up to greet their master, their curious glances at Olivia barely concealed. The Duke introduced her with minimal explanation. "Miss Hartwood will be instructing me in cookery. She is to have access to the kitchens at all times." The housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, a plump woman with kind eyes, showed Olivia to a comfortable room in the family wing rather than the servants' quarters, a distinction that clearly puzzled the staff but which Olivia appreciated. The room was larger than any she had occupied before, with a small sitting area and a window overlooking the east garden. "His Grace requested you be placed near his study," Mrs. Winters explained. "For convenience," he said. "When will lessons begin?" Olivia asked as she removed her bonnet. "Tomorrow morning, miss." "His Grace rises early, 6 o'clock breakfast, then he attends to correspondence until 9. He's indicated your lessons should commence at 9:30. After Mrs. Winters departed, Olivia unpacked her meagre belongings and the new garments Lady Germain had provided. Her fingers traced the fine wool of a dark green day dress. The fabric alone would have cost her a month's wages at the academy. The situation was strange indeed, but she could not afford to question her good fortune. The Duke did not appear at dinner, which Olivia took alone in a small dining room adjacent to the main hall. The meal was exquisite: roast duck with cherry sauce, buttered asparagus, and a delicate lemon tart that made her wonder what she could possibly teach the Duke that his own cook did not already know. Morning arrived with pale sunlight streaming through her window and a maid bringing hot water and a breakfast tray. By 9:30, Olivia had toured the kitchens, introduced herself to the cook, a formidable Frenchman named Monsieur Belfort who regarded her with thinly veiled suspicion, and prepared the workspace for her first lesson. The Duke arrived precisely on time, dressed not in his fine clothes from the previous day but in simpler attire, trousers, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and a waistcoat unbuttoned. "Good morning, Your Grace," Olivia said, forcing brightness into her tone. He grunted in response, his gaze taking in the flour, yeast, and bowls she had arranged. "Bread?" he asked, his tone suggesting she had proposed they create a palace from sugar. "The foundation of cooking is understanding ingredients," she replied. "Bread is a perfect beginning, simple yet requiring attention to detail. I hired you to teach me elaborate dishes, Miss Hartwood. Things that would impress." Olivia measured flour into a bowl before answering. "May I ask why you wish to learn cooking, Your Grace?" It's an unusual pursuit for a duke. His jaw tightened. My reasons are my own. Of course. But knowing your aims would help me tailor the lessons. He watched her add salt to the flour, his expression inscrutable. Finally, he sighed. I made a wager. A wager? With the Duke of Harrington. He claimed no gentleman could master the domestic arts within 6 months. I disagreed. Olivia paused in her measuring. So this is about pride. It is about proving a point, Miss Hartwood. That a man of intellect can master any skill he chooses. She bit back a smile. Even one traditionally performed by women. His eyes narrowed. Precisely. I see. And what are the stakes of this wager? His prize racehorse against my newest acquisition, a stallion from Arabia. Valuable animals. Extremely. He rolled his shoulders, as if uncomfortable with the conversation. Now, shall we proceed with this bread? Olivia demonstrated how to activate the yeast in warm water with a spoonful of sugar, explaining the science of fermentation. To her surprise, the Duke listened intently, asking questions that revealed a keen mind. When it came time to knead the dough, however, his patience evaporated. This is servant's work, he muttered as flour dusted his hands. This is the foundation of bread making, Olivia corrected. The gluten must be developed properly. She demonstrated the motion, press, fold, turn. Like this, Your Grace. He mimicked her actions awkwardly, his strong hands applying too much pressure. The dough flattened beneath his palms. Gently, she instructed, moving closer. May I? After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. Olivia placed her hands over his, guiding his movements. She was acutely aware of their proximity, of his breathing, of the warmth of his skin beneath her fingertips. Like this, she murmured. Feel how the dough changes as you work it. He nodded, his earlier irritation softening into concentration. For several minutes they worked together, until the dough achieved the proper elasticity. There, she said, stepping back. Now we let it rise. While the dough rose, Olivia explained the next steps and answered the Duke's increasingly specific questions about chemical reactions and timing. When the bread finally emerged from the oven, a perfectly golden loaf, she felt a rush of pride. Not bad for a first attempt, she said, placing the bread on a cooling rack. The Duke broke off a piece, steam rising as he tore the crust. He tasted it cautiously, then with more enthusiasm. It's good, he admitted, surprise evident in his voice. Bread is honest food, Your Grace. It rewards patience and attention. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Things I am not known for possessing, Miss Hartwood. Then perhaps you will learn more than cooking during our time together. His expression closed again, the momentary warmth vanishing. That will be all for today. Same time tomorrow. The pattern continued for a week, precise, formal lessons where Olivia taught and the Duke learned with surprising aptitude. They progressed from bread to simple soups, then to more complex dishes. Despite his initial resistance, Lord Lawrence proved to be an attentive student with an excellent memory and a knack for precise measurements. What he lacked was patience for processes that could not be hurried and forgiveness for his own mistakes. When a sauce separated or a pastry collapsed, his mood darkened considerably. On the 8th day, disaster struck. They were attempting a Charlotte Russe, a delicate dessert of ladyfingers surrounding Bavarian cream. The Duke had insisted on attempting it despite Olivia's warnings about its complexity. When the dessert collapsed as he attempted to unmold it, he swore under his breath. This is pointless, he snapped, pushing away from the table. I cannot master this in time. Your Grace, Olivia said calmly, cooking is not about mastery but about practice. No one creates perfect dishes without failures along the way. I do not have the luxury of failure, Miss Hartwood. His voice was tight with frustration. Harrington visits in 5 months. If I cannot present a dinner cooked entirely by my own hand, then you lose a horse. Olivia interrupted, her patience wearing thin. Forgive me, but that hardly seems catastrophic. His eyes flashed. It is not about the horse. Then what is it about? She challenged, forgetting her place entirely. For a moment, she thought he might dismiss her on the spot. Instead, he turned to stare out the kitchen window, his posture rigid. 2 years ago, he began, his voice low, my carriage overturned during a storm. My wife and I were returning from a house party at Harrington's estate. Olivia's heart sank. She had not known he was a widower. Eleanor died instantly. I survived, though not unscathed. His hand rose unconsciously to the scar on his face. Harrington blamed himself for insisting we travel despite the weather. I blamed myself for not listening to Eleanor's concerns about the road conditions. He paused, his jaw working. After the funeral, I withdrew from society. Harrington was one of the few who persisted in calling on me, dragging me back into the world of the living. This wager, it was his way of challenging me to engage with life again. I see, Olivia said softly. I'm very sorry for your loss, Your Grace. He nodded stiffly. Eleanor was an accomplished hostess. She prided herself on overseeing every detail of our entertainments, often working alongside our cook to create special dishes for guests. A faint smile touched his lips. She would have found this wager highly amusing. Understanding dawned. This wasn't merely about winning a bet, it was about honoring his wife's memory by mastering something she had valued. We'll try the Charlotte again, Olivia said firmly. But first, let's clean up this attempt and analyze what went wrong. To her surprise, he nodded and rolled up his sleeves once more. That afternoon marked a shift in their relationship. The Duke began to share stories of Eleanor during their lessons, her favorite dishes, her disastrous first attempts at cooking, the dinner parties she had hosted. In turn, Olivia spoke of her own background, her father's death, her mother's illness, her years at the academy. As summer bloomed across the estate, they settled into a routine. Mornings were devoted to cooking, afternoons to the Duke's estate business, and evenings often found them in the library, discussing books or playing chess. The household staff watched this developing companionship with varying reactions, Mrs. Winters with approval, Monsieur Belfort with competitive interest, and the Duke's valet, Harrison, with thinly veiled concern. By August, the Duke had progressed to complex French dishes and elaborate pastries. His hands, once awkward with cooking implements, now moved with confidence. More striking was the change in his demeanor, the perpetual scowl had softened, and he laughed more freely. One evening, as they walked through the rose garden after dinner, he surprised her with a question. What will you do when our contract ends, Miss Hartwood? Olivia had been avoiding this thought. I shall seek another position, I suppose. Perhaps as a governess. You dislike teaching cooking? Not at all. I enjoy it immensely. But positions such as this are rare. He was silent for several steps. You could remain at Pembroke. Her heart stuttered. As what, Your Grace? As? He hesitated. As the children's instructor, when they come. You have children. This was news to her. No. His cheeks colored slightly. But I should like to, someday. When I remarry. Ah. Olivia kept her voice neutral despite the inexplicable disappointment that washed over her. You are considering matrimony again. My aunt has suggested it is time. The duchy needs an heir. Of course. She forced a smile. And do you have a particular lady in mind? He stopped walking, turning to face her. Aunt Augusta has several candidates she deems suitable. Daughters of earls, mostly. Young ladies with impeccable breeding and substantial dowries. How fortunate, Olivia murmured, looking away. Indeed. His tone was sardonic. I'm to host a house party next month, Harrington and his wife, Aunt Augusta, and 3 eligible young ladies with their mothers. Then we must accelerate your lessons. You'll want to impress your guests with your culinary achievements. Yes. He frowned slightly. That was my thinking as well. They resumed walking in silence, the easy camaraderie of earlier evaporated. Olivia chided herself for her foolishness. Of course the Duke would remarry someone of his own class. Her position in his household had always been temporary, a means to an end. The next morning, Olivia woke to find a letter had been slipped beneath her door. It was from her mother, forwarded from Lady Germain's London address. As she read, her heart sank. Her mother's health had worsened, and the doctor recommended treatment at a specialist hospital in Switzerland, treatment they could not afford. Olivia dressed mechanically, her mind racing. Even with her generous salary, she could not accumulate enough for her mother's care in time. Perhaps Lady Germain might advance her wages, or... Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at her door. It was not the maid but Mrs. Winters, her expression grave. "Miss Hartwood, His Grace requests your presence in the study immediately." "Is something wrong?" The housekeeper hesitated. "A visitor has arrived." "From London." Puzzled, Olivia followed Mrs. Winters to the Duke's study. Inside, Lord Lawrence stood by the fireplace, his posture tense. Seated in a chair was a woman Olivia recognized with a jolt of alarm, Mrs. Finch, the former headmistress of Winterton's Academy. "Miss Hartwood," the Duke said, his voice unnaturally formal. "This lady claims acquaintance with you." "Indeed, Your Grace." "Mrs. Finch was my employer at the Academy." Mrs. Finch rose, her thin face pinched with disapproval. "Former employer, as you well know. The Academy closed because of your actions." Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. "That is not true." "Is it not?" Mrs. Finch turned to the Duke. "Your Grace, I felt it my duty to inform you of the character of the woman you've welcomed into your home. Miss Hartwood was dismissed from her position for improper relations with my son." The Duke's expression hardened. "That is a serious accusation." "It is false," Olivia said firmly, though her voice shook. "I rejected Mr. Finch's advances. He retaliated by spreading rumors. Rumors that destroyed my academy." Mrs. Finch spat. "After she refused him, she poisoned the minds of students against him with tales of his so-called misconduct. Parents withdrew their daughters. We lost everything. Because your son was attempting to seduce students," Olivia countered, her fear giving way to anger. "I reported what I witnessed, as was my duty." "Your Grace," Mrs. Finch said, ignoring Olivia, "I merely wish to warn you. A young, unmarried woman living in the home of a bachelor, it recalls the very situation she engineered with my son." The Duke's jaw tightened. "Thank you for your concern, Mrs. Finch. Jenkins will show you out. But, good day, madam." His tone brooked no argument. When the door closed behind Mrs. Finch and the butler, silence fell. Olivia stood rigid, waiting for the Duke's judgment. "Why did you not tell me?" he asked finally. "It was not relevant to my position here," she replied. "And I feared you would believe the worst without knowing me. As I likely would have." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Is what she said true? Did you report her son?" "Yes. He was inappropriate with several students. When I confronted him, he made advances toward me. I rejected him and reported the incidents to the school board. They were preparing to investigate when Mr. Finch began spreading rumors about me, claiming I had been the one to initiate an affair and was vengeful when he ended it. And the parents believed him rather than you. Some did. Others withdrew their daughters regardless of what they believed, unwilling to be associated with any scandal." The Duke was silent for a long moment. "I am familiar with the power of rumors, Miss Hartwood. 2 years ago, there were whispers that I had been driving while intoxicated on the night of the accident. That Eleanor's death was my fault." Olivia's eyes widened. "That's terrible." "It was also untrue. But mud sticks, as they say." He moved to stand before her. "I believe your account, Miss Hartwood. However, Mrs. Finch's visit raises a concern I cannot ignore." Her heart sank. "You wish me to leave?" "No." His answer was immediate. But your reputation is at risk so long as you remain here as my employee. The house party begins in 3 weeks. Gossip travels quickly in society circles. If Mrs. Finch spreads her version of events. I understand, Olivia said quietly. I shall pack my things. That is not what I meant. He took a deep breath. Miss Hartwood, Olivia, there is another solution, though I hesitate to suggest it. Something in his tone made her look up sharply. His expression was uncharacteristically uncertain. What solution? Marriage, he said simply. Olivia stared at him in disbelief. I beg your pardon. As my wife, your position would be unassailable. No one would dare repeat Mrs. Finch's accusations. Your Grace, this is... I cannot accept such an offer made out of pity or obligation. It is neither. He stepped closer. I had planned to wait until after the house party to speak, but circumstances have forced my hand. These past months have shown me that I can find happiness again, happiness I thought died with Eleanor. But the eligible young ladies your aunt has selected mean nothing to me. You, on the other hand. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle. You have brought life back to this house. To me. Olivia's mind whirled. Society would never accept such a match. A duke and a cooking instructor? Lady Germain would be horrified. Aunt Augusta's primary concern is my happiness. As for society, he shrugged. I care little for their opinion. I have wealth enough that we need not concern ourselves with acceptance. My mother is ill, Olivia blurted. She needs expensive treatment. I cannot, we will arrange it immediately, he said, squeezing her hand. Olivia, I am not proposing a marriage of convenience. I am proposing because I have grown to care for you deeply. If you do not share those feelings, I understand. But please do not refuse me out of concern for social standing or financial matters. Tears welled in her eyes. I do care for you, Lawrence. More than I should. But this is so sudden. Take time to consider, he said. But know that my offer stands regardless of your answer. Your position here is secure, and I will assist with your mother's care in any case. Olivia looked into his eyes, no longer stormy but warm with affection, and made her decision. I don't need time. My answer is yes. His face transformed with a smile so radiant it took her breath away. He bent his head, and their lips met in a kiss that promised a future neither had dared imagine. They were married by special license the following week in the small chapel on the estate grounds. Lady Germain arrived 2 days before the ceremony, her initial shock giving way to grudging approval when she witnessed the obvious happiness of her nephew. You've managed what I thought impossible, she told Olivia privately. You've brought him back to life. The house party was transformed into a wedding celebration. The Duke of Harrington arrived with his Duchess, delighted by the turn of events. I never imagined my wager would lead to this, he told Lawrence at the wedding breakfast. Though I still expect that dinner you promised, cooked entirely by your own hand. Lawrence laughed, his arm around his new wife's waist. You shall have it. Though I warn you, my wife is an excellent teacher. You may lose your horse yet. Olivia's mother arrived from Bath, weak but overjoyed at her daughter's good fortune. Arrangements for her treatment in Switzerland were already in motion, paid for by the Duke with a generosity that brought tears to Mrs. Hartwood's eyes. That evening, as the celebration continued below, the Duke and Duchess of Pembroke stood together on the balcony of their chambers, overlooking the moonlit gardens. Are you happy, my love? Lawrence asked, his arms encircling her from behind. Olivia leaned back against his chest, content beyond words. Extraordinarily so. Though I wonder what became of our Charlotte Russ. We never did perfect it. He chuckled, his breath warm against her ear. Perhaps we shall attempt it again tomorrow. We have a lifetime to practice. As summer faded to autumn, the kitchens at Pembroke Estate continued to be filled with laughter, occasional mishaps, and the enticing aromas of the Duke and Duchess's collaborative culinary efforts. The scandal that Mrs. Finch attempted to revive fell flat against the obvious devotion of the couple, and society eventually embraced the romantic notion of a duke who had found love in the most unlikely of places. When the Duke of Harrington arrived for his promised dinner in November, he was treated to a 7-course meal prepared entirely by his host, a feast that included perfectly executed French dishes, delicate pastries, and, for dessert, a flawless Charlotte Russe that would have made the finest pastry chef in Paris proud. As Harrington conceded defeat and the deed to his prized racehorse, Lawrence raised his glass to his wife. "To my teacher," he said, his eyes shining with love, "who taught me far more than how to bake bread."